Isaac Walker stood at the edge of the town square, autumn wind pulling at his worn coat. The widow auction was in full swing, and his jaw clenched tighter with each passing minute. He'd come to Redemption Creek for supplies, not to witness this brutal custom that reduced women to household labor contracts. 3 widows had already been sold to prosperous farmers. The auctioneer's voice rang hollow across the square, cheerful and mercenary. Isaac touched his pockets unconsciously, empty except for the $1 coin meant for flour and salt. Next we have Mrs. Melissa Crawford, the auctioneer called. Fine woman, capable hands. Comes with... Melissa stepped onto the wooden platform, and Isaac's breath caught. 2 small children clung to her faded skirts, a girl of perhaps 8 and a boy no more than 5. The woman's face was pale but composed, her spine straight, despite the threadbare shawl that whipped around her shoulders. The crowd murmured immediate assessments. Too frail. Look at those children. Not worth feeding 3 mouths through winter. Wealthy Harrison Grange stepped forward, his thumbs hooked in his vest. He circled the platform once, eyes calculating. Then he shook his head and stepped back. Too much trouble, he announced. Other farmers followed his lead. One by one they withdrew their interest, some with dismissive waves, others with cruel commentary that carried across the square. Worthless. Someone muttered loud enough for Melissa to hear. Her shoulders trembled. Just once, barely visible, but Isaac saw it. He saw the tears she refused to let fall. Saw her daughter bury her face in her mother's skirt. Saw the little boy's confused, frightened eyes scanning the hostile crowd. Isaac's hands clenched into fists. His cabin sat empty 3 miles outside town. He had barely enough stores to feed himself through the coming winter. Taking on 3 more mouths would be madness. Reckless charity that could kill them all come February. Going once, the auctioneer called, relief in his voice. He wanted this over. This awkward moment where no one wanted the merchandise. Going twice. Dead silence blanketed the square. Melissa's shoulders shook harder now. The little girl started to cry softly. Isaac felt something break open inside his chest. Some wall he'd built 3 years ago when they buried Mary and their stillborn son. He'd told himself isolation was protection, that shutting out the world meant it couldn't hurt him again. But watching Melissa stand there, dignity crumbling under the weight of cruel judgment, Isaac realized his isolation had just been slow dying. His hand rose before his mind could approve the action. $1, Isaac called out. His voice cut through the silence like an axe through frozen wood. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the laughter erupted. Charity bid, someone shouted. Poor fool's throwing away his last dollar. Walker's gone soft in the head. The auctioneer blinked, uncertain whether to accept such an insult of a bid. But he was eager to finish this uncomfortable business. He raised his gavel. $1 to Isaac Walker. Going once, twice sold. The gavel slammed down. The crowd's laughter swelled, then began to dissipate as people returned to their business. Just another transaction complete, another widow disposed of. Melissa descended the platform steps on trembling legs. Isaac moved through the thinning crowd to meet her at the bottom. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30 at most. Her eyes were green and red-rimmed from held-back tears. She clutched a small bundle to her chest, everything she owned in the world, wrapped in faded cloth. When she looked at Isaac, her voice came out broken and small. I guess that's all I'm worth. She whispered, $1. The words hit Isaac harder than any fist. He took a breath, then spoke loud enough for the lingering onlookers to hear. No, he said firmly. $1 is all I have. If I had 1,000, I'd have bid it all. Your worth isn't measured by cruel men's words. He looked down at her children. The girl had stopped crying but watched him with wary, intelligent eyes. The boy's thumb was in his mouth, his free hand wrapped tight in his mother's skirt. You 3 are coming to a home where you're wanted, Isaac continued. Not bought, wanted. There's a difference. Melissa's eyes filled with fresh tears, but different ones now. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, she just nodded. Isaac helped her gather their few possessions. As they walked toward his wagon at the edge of the square, the crowd parted in silence. Some faces showed contempt, others confusion. A few, very few, showed something that might have been grudging respect. Harrison Grange stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head. "You'll regret that charity, Walker. 3 more mouths and your soft heart will see you all starve come spring." Isaac didn't respond. He helped Melissa up onto the wagon seat, then lifted the children into the back. The girl settled her brother carefully, wrapping him in the thin blanket Isaac kept there. "What are your names?" Isaac asked as he climbed up beside Melissa. "Emma," the girl said quietly. "And this is Samuel. I'm Isaac Walker. We've got a ride ahead of us." He clicked his tongue and the horses started forward. Behind them, Redemption Creek continued its business as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis for 4 people heading west into the autumn afternoon. The first miles passed in silence. The wagon creaked along the rutted road, wheels finding every stone and hollow. Autumn grassland stretched endlessly on either side, golden in the slanting light. Finally, Melissa spoke. "I can work, Mr. Walker. I can earn my keep. I'm not afraid of hard labor." "It's Isaac," he said. "And it's not about earning. It's about living." She looked at him sidelong, uncertain what to make of that. After another stretch of silence, she began to speak in fragments, as if the words were being pulled from some deep well. Her husband James had died 18 months ago in a mining accident. The debts consumed everything: their small house, their savings, even James's tools. The landlord had forced the auction to recoup his losses. Before James, she'd been a schoolteacher in a smaller town to the east. "I had books once," she said softly. "I taught children to read. That feels like another life now." Isaac nodded. "I know about other lives." When Melissa glanced at him questioningly, he kept his eyes on the road. "My wife Mary died 3 years back. Childbirth. The baby too, a son. I kept the farm running, but I let everything else just stop. I'm sorry." Melissa said, "Me too. For both of us." In the back, the children had fallen asleep. Curled together under the blanket, Samuel's head rested on his sister's shoulder. Emma's thin arm wrapped protectively around him. "They're good children," Isaac said. "Brave ones. To stand up there with you. They've had to be brave too often." Melissa's voice caught. "Children shouldn't have to learn courage from necessity." "No." Isaac agreed. "They shouldn't." The sun was setting when they crested a hill, and Isaac's homestead came into view. The cabin sat small and weathered in the valley below, its windows dark. The barn leaned slightly, needing repairs he'd never gotten around to. Fields lay dormant, waiting for spring planting. Melissa studied it all: the modest buildings, the dormant land, the isolation. She was seeing his poverty clearly now, understanding what $1 meant in context. "It's not much," Isaac said, shame creeping into his voice. "It's more than a platform," Melissa answered quietly. They descended the hill as dusk deepened. When they reached the cabin, Isaac pulled the wagon close to the door. He climbed down, then lifted Samuel carefully from the back. The boy barely stirred, just murmured something in his sleep. Emma woke and climbed down by herself. Melissa followed, clutching their bundle. They all stood looking at the closed cabin door in the gathering dark. Isaac shifted Samuel in his arms and looked back at Melissa. She stood straight despite her exhaustion, her daughter pressed against her side. For a moment they just looked at each other. These 2 people whose lives had collided in a town square, now standing on the threshold of something neither could name. Melissa nodded once. Permission. Or perhaps acknowledgement that there was no going back now. Isaac turned and opened the door. The cabin was cold and dark, smelling of emptiness and bachelor neglect. But as Isaac stepped inside with the sleeping boy in his arms, and Melissa followed with Emma, the space began to shift. Already it felt less like a tomb and more like a beginning. The first morning, Isaac woke in the barn loft he'd taken for himself. He'd given his bed to Melissa and Emma, promised to build Samuel a proper sleeping place in the cabin's small loft space. For now, the boy slept in a nest of blankets near the hearth. Inside, he found Melissa already awake, sweeping 3 years of dust from corners. She'd rekindled the fire and put coffee on to boil. Emma was organizing their few possessions carefully on the shelf Isaac had cleared. "You didn't have to start so early," Isaac said. "Idle hands never suited me." Melissa didn't stop sweeping. "Besides, I've seen what bachelor living does to a kitchen." Isaac almost smiled. Almost. The days fell into tentative patterns. Melissa cleaned with fierce energy, as if she could scrub away the shame of the auction platform. Isaac repaired shutters, fixed the barn door, built Samuel's loft with careful attention. The boy watched every hammer stroke, asking endless questions. "Why does the nail go in crooked sometimes? How do you know which board is strong enough? Can I try?" Isaac found himself answering patiently, letting small hands hold the hammer under his guidance. Emma helped her mother but kept watchful eyes on everything, still waiting for this fragile safety to shatter. On the third day, Mrs. Thornton arrived with a basket of supplies. She swept into the cabin with false charity bright in her eyes. "I heard about your acquisition. Mr. Walker thought you might need some help managing." She looked at Melissa as if assessing livestock. "The poor dear looks half-starved." "We're managing fine," Isaac said evenly. Mrs. Thornton set the basket down with a theatrical sigh. "Well, the church ladies thought it was the Christian thing to do, though I must say, the propriety of the situation is questionable. A woman and children, living here without Mrs. Thornton," Isaac interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "They're under my protection. That's all anyone needs to know." The woman's mouth pinched. She left with stiff goodbyes and knowing looks that promised gossip to spread like wildfire. That evening, they gathered around the table for supper. Melissa had made biscuits from Isaac's meager flour stores. They were light and perfect. Nothing like the heavy lumps Isaac had been making for 3 years. Samuel chattered about his loft, about the farm, about everything. Emma ate quietly. But Isaac noticed she'd relaxed slightly, her shoulders less rigid. After the children went to bed, Isaac and Melissa lingered by the fire. The silence between them was different now, less awkward, more companionable. "Thank you," Melissa said softly, "for standing up to her, to all of them." "Nothing to thank." Isaac prodded the fire with a stick. "People talk. Let them." Melissa picked up mending, her needle catching firelight. Long minutes passed in comfortable quiet. Just the crackle of burning wood and the whisper of thread through fabric. "For what?" Isaac asked. "For seeing us." Melissa said, "On that platform. You actually saw us." Isaac set down the stick. "Thank you for staying." The fire crackled. Neither spoke again. But something had been acknowledged. Some foundation laid that was stronger than words. Winter came early that year, with snow falling before Thanksgiving. The cabin grew cozy despite the cold outside. Isaac split enough wood to keep the hearth burning through the darkest months. Melissa made the supplies stretch with careful planning, turning little into much through skill Isaac hadn't known existed. One evening, a week before Christmas, they sat by the fire after supper. Samuel was building something with small sticks Isaac had whittled smooth. Emma was practicing her letters on a slate Melissa had unpacked from their bundle. Samuel looked up suddenly at Isaac. "Will you be our papa?" The question hung in the warm air. Melissa's hands froze on her mending, her face flushing. "Samuel, that's not—" "I'd be honored, son," Isaac said carefully. "If your mama thinks it's right." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. She set down her mending and covered her face with her hands. Emma moved close to her mother, uncertain whether to comfort or protect. "I'm sorry," Melissa whispered. "I just at the auction, when they laughed. Part of me believed them, that I really was worthless. That the crowd was right and you were just, I was seeing what they couldn't," Isaac said. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Melissa, look at me." She lowered her hands. Her face was blotchy and tear-streaked, and Isaac thought she'd never looked more real. "You stood up there with your head high while cruel people judged you. You've kept these children safe and loved through things that would break most folks. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You think that's worth $1. That's worth everything." "I thought," Melissa's voice broke, "I thought God was punishing me. Taking James, taking our home, putting us on that platform. Maybe God was getting you to where you needed to be." Isaac said quietly, "Getting all of us there." He told her about Mary then, about the guilt he'd carried, the belief that if he'd been more prosperous, gotten better care, made different choices, she might have lived. How he'd locked himself away in punishment, thinking isolation was what he deserved. "But keeping yourself closed away doesn't honor the dead," Isaac said. "It just makes more ghosts, more empty houses." The children had stopped their activities, listening with the solemn attention of those who've learned too young that adult conversations shape their worlds. "I can read Latin," Melissa said suddenly, then laughed at the non sequitur. "I don't know why I said that. Just, I was a real teacher, with students and books and a schoolhouse." "Could you teach me?" Isaac asked. "To read better. I mean, I know my letters but never got past basic words." Melissa's face transformed. "You'd want to learn, always did, just never had the chance." They talked deep into the night. About teaching, about dreams deferred, about building something better. Melissa's idea emerged slowly, a small school on the property next year. Teach the neighbor children. Give Emma and Samuel a real education. Would folks send their children here? Melissa wondered. Some would, the ones who matter. Isaac fed another log to the fire. And others would come around once they saw what you could do. Very late, with the fire dying to embers, they both stood to seek their beds. For a moment they were close in the dimness, and Isaac felt the pull between them something more than gratitude, deeper than companionship. He almost reached for her hand, almost. "Good night, Melissa." "Good night, Isaac." The use of first names felt intimate. A small bridge crossed. They retreated to their separate sleeping spaces. But the cabin felt different now, less like shelter and more like home. The first real storm hit in January. Snow fell for 3 days straight, piling into drifts that buried the bottom fence rails. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in its bucket overnight. Isaac worked himself near exhaustion, keeping them supplied chopping wood, breaking ice from the well, checking the barn animals. In town, when he went for supplies he couldn't afford, he felt the weight of his choice. 4 mouths instead of 1. His stores were dwindling faster than he'd calculated. Harrison Grange caught him outside the general store. "Offer still stands. Walker, sell me her contract. $50. You keep the children. I'll take the woman. She can earn her keep at my place." Isaac's hands clenched. "She's not for sale, never was. Everything's for sale. You'll see that come February when you're all starving." Isaac walked away. But Grange's words followed him home. Doubt crept in during the cold nights. Had he been reckless? Had his moment of moral righteousness doomed them all? Then Emma fell ill. It started with a cough on a Tuesday morning. By evening, she was feverish. By the second day, the fever soared and she was barely conscious. Melissa sat by her daughter's bedside, her face gray with terror. "I can't lose her," she whispered to Isaac. "I can't. She's all I have of James. She's everything." "You won't lose her." Isaac said it with more confidence than he felt. The traveling pharmacist comes through Redemption Creek every 2 weeks. He'll be there today or tomorrow. We don't have money for medicine. Isaac thought of his father's gold pocket watch, tucked in the wooden box under his bed. The only valuable thing he owned, the last connection to his past. I'll get the medicine, he said. He rode through the blizzard, pushing his horse hard, in town. He found the pharmacist preparing to leave. Isaac explained about Emma's fever, the symptoms, the desperate need. The pharmacist named his price, $15. Isaac pulled out the pocket watch. It caught the lamplight, gold gleaming. His father had carried it through the war between the states, had given it to Isaac on his wedding day. Isaac could see the inscription, "For my son," with pride. Will you take this? Isaac asked. It's worth more than 15. The pharmacist examined it, nodded. The watch disappeared into his bag. Medicine appeared in its place. Isaac rode back through the storm, the precious bottles tucked inside his coat. He burst into the cabin to find Melissa still at Emma's bedside, the girl's breathing shallow and rapid. Together they administered the medicine. Then they waited. 3 nights passed in vigil. Melissa wouldn't leave Emma's side. Isaac kept the fire roaring, made broth Melissa wouldn't eat, prayed to a god he'd stopped talking to 3 years ago. On the 4th morning, Emma's fever broke. Color returned to her cheeks. She opened her eyes and asked for water in a voice like paper. Melissa collapsed into sobs, her head on the bed beside her daughter. Emma's small hand patted her mother's hair. Don't cry. Mama, I'm okay now. Isaac stepped outside to give them privacy and found himself trembling. Relief and exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He'd traded his past for their future, and he'd do it again without hesitation. Later, Melissa found him in the barn. How did you pay for the medicine? Doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter, he said firmly. Emma's alive. That's what matters. Melissa stepped close, looking up at him in the dim barn light. Maybe I brought you nothing but trouble. Maybe you should have let me... Don't. Isaac's voice was sharp. Don't ever say that. We're family now. Family means you weather storms together. Family, Melissa repeated softly, testing the word. Family, Isaac confirmed. She reached out and took his hand, squeezed it once. Then she returned to the cabin to sit with her daughter. Isaac stood alone in the barn, snow still falling outside, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose, or just the knowledge that he'd finally chosen life over isolation. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something precious had been protected after Emma's recovery. Something changed in Melissa. She stopped apologizing for space she occupied. She reorganized the cabin with quiet authority, making decisions without asking permission. She was done performing gratitude. One evening, Isaac found her teaching both children by lamplight. Books from her bundle lay spread on the table, worn texts she'd saved through everything. Her voice was confident as she guided Emma through a passage, helped Samuel with his letters. Isaac stood in the doorway, watching. The firelight caught in Melissa's hair, turned her profile golden. She wasn't pretty in the conventional way, too thin, too worn by hardship, but she was beautiful. Intelligent and strong and entirely herself. The realization hit Isaac like a thrown stone. He was falling in love with her. Not with Mary's ghost, not with some replacement for his loss. With Melissa herself, this woman who'd stood on a platform and refused to break. She looked up and caught him staring. What? Nothing. Just you're good at that. Teaching. I know, she said simply. No false modesty, just fact. Later that week, old Tom Chen came riding up the lane. The Chinese immigrant ran a small farm east of Isaac's, facing his own share of prejudice from the town. He carried a cloth bag and his weathered face was kind. Heard your little one was sick, Tom said. Brought some things, dried fish, rice, seeds for spring planting. Isaac was stunned. Tom, I can't. You stood up when others laughed. Tom interrupted. At that auction, I was there. I saw. He handed over the bag. The men who laugh at courage aren't worth knowing. The ones who show it are. After Tom left, Melissa said quietly, You have good friends. I have one, Isaac corrected. One's more than I had before you came. That night, with the children asleep. Isaac made his decision. He'd been protecting his heart, calling them family while keeping emotional distance. But Emma's illness had shown him the truth. They were already everything to him. Pretending otherwise was just cowardice. Melissa, he said, I want to make this legal. Real marriage, partnership. I don't want you ever standing on a platform again, not even in fear of it. Melissa set down her mending. Why, because Isaac, struggled for words. Because you belong here. Because this feels right. Because, do you love me? Her voice was steady. Or do you love the idea of not being alone? Isaac met her eyes. I love you. The real you. Your strength and your stubbornness and the way you teach our children, the way you stand up straight even when the world tries to bend you. I love you. Melissa Crawford. Not as replacement for Mary. As yourself. Tears tracked down her face. I choose this. She said, I need you to know that. Not because I need rescuing anymore. Because I choose you. Choose this life. Choose us. Yes, yes. Isaac crossed the space between them, took her hands in his. They stood together in the firelight. Two people who'd been broken finding themselves whole again. Outside, winter was finally losing its grip. The snow had melted at the edges. The days were lengthening. Spring was coming, and with it, possibility. We'll build the school come spring, Isaac said. You'll teach, I'll farm. We'll make a life that matters. We already are, Melissa answered. That night, they stood together at the window, watching the last snow fall. His hand found hers. Their fingers interlaced. The lamp behind them glowed steady, warming the cabin they'd turned into a home. We'll build something good here, Isaac said. We already have, Melissa replied. The future stretched before them, uncertain but theirs to shape. And for the first time in 3 long years, Isaac felt truly alive. Spring came late but glorious. The snow melted into rushing streams. Green erupted across the brown land. Isaac and Melissa married in a quiet ceremony at the church, with Reverend Pierce officiating and Tom Chen standing as witness. Emma and Samuel stood with them, part of the vows that bound them together. The town watched with mixed reactions. Some approved. Others muttered about propriety and improper haste. Isaac didn't care. They were legal now, truly family, and no one could question it. We're building the school, Isaac announced to Reverend Pierce after the ceremony. Melissa will teach. We'll take any children whose parents want them educated. The Reverend looked uncertain. That's ambitious. Have you discussed it with the community? I'm discussing it with you now. There'll be a meeting at the church next Sunday. Tell people to come if they want their children learning. The meeting arrived with nervous energy. Families filled the pews, curious and skeptical. Harrison Grange stood at the back, arms crossed and face hostile. Isaac stood at the front, Melissa beside him. Her hand was steady in his. My wife has teaching credentials, Isaac began. She taught in Denver before hardship struck. We're building a 1-room school on our property. We'll take students no charge, though families can contribute what they can spare. We don't need charity, Grange called out. Especially from some woman bought at auction. The room went silent. Melissa's hand tightened in Isaac's, but she didn't flinch. Isaac's voice stayed calm. That woman has more learning than anyone in this room. She's taught our children, my children, more in 4 months than I learned in years. She reads Latin and teaches mathematics and knows history you've never heard of. She's auction trash. Grange spat. No, Isaac said firmly. She's my wife. She's a teacher. And if you're too proud to let her teach your children, that's your loss. But we're building the school regardless. Melissa stepped forward then. Her voice rang clear. I taught in Denver before my husband died. I have credentials. But more than that, I have reason to teach. Because every child deserves better than cruelty. Deserves education and opportunity and someone who believes in them. She looked around the room, meeting eyes. Your children are watching how you treat people right now. Watching what you value. Is it worth teaching them that dignity can be bought and sold, or is it worth showing them that worth is inherent? The silence stretched. Then Mrs. Thornton stood. Her face was conflicted, but her voice was clear. I've seen the Walker children. Emma reads better than my own. Samuel does mathematics in his head. If Mrs. Walker can do that, she paused. I'd like to send my youngest. Tom Chen stood next. My daughter, too. One by one, families stood. Not all Grange and his allies remained seated, glaring. But enough, more than enough. After the meeting, walking home in the spring dusk, the children ran ahead. Isaac and Melissa paused on the hill overlooking their land. Foundation posts already marked where the school would stand. Think they'll really send their children? Melissa asked. Enough will. And more when they see what you do. Isaac squeezed her hand. You were magnificent in there. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it magnificent. They stood together, watching their children play in the new grass. The cabin lights glowed warm behind them. The school frame waited to be built. Their future spread before them like the spring land full of work and possibility and hope. We did it, Melissa said. We did, Isaac agreed. And as the sun set gold over their homestead, they knew the hardest battles were behind them. Everything ahead was just living. Late spring arrived in glory. The one-room schoolhouse stood complete, rough-hewn but sturdy. Melissa had 6 regular students now, including Emma and Samuel. She taught reading, arithmetic, geography, and history with passionate dedication. Today was demonstration day. Parents invited to see their children's progress. Melissa stood at the front of the small classroom, her posture confident and her voice clear. Isaac sat in the back row, watching his wife teach with fierce pride. Emma read aloud from a history text, her voice steady and clear. Samuel demonstrated multiplication on the slate board, his small hand gripping the chalk with careful precision. The other children followed, each showing what they'd learned. The parents watched in silence. Mrs. Thornton wiped her eyes. Tom Chen beamed. Even families who'd been skeptical looked impressed. This wasn't charity education, this was real, quality teaching. After the demonstration, families lingered to thank Melissa. Some promised to send younger siblings next term. The transformation was visible. Melissa was no longer auction trash or Walker's charity case. She was Mrs. Walker, the teacher, respected for her skill and dedication. Walking home that evening, their small family moved together through the warm spring air. Emma and Samuel ran ahead, chasing each other through the new grass. Their laughter floated back on the breeze. Isaac and Melissa walked slower, hand in hand. The cabin came into view, lamplight already glowing from windows Emma had opened that morning. The garden bloomed with early vegetables. The fields showed green with planted crops. The schoolhouse stood across the lane, solid and real. It's different now, Melissa said, standing in front of people, teaching instead of being judged. You stood strong both times. Isaac observed. That's what they couldn't take from you. Your spine. Melissa smiled. You didn't save me that day at the auction. You saw me. There's a difference. I saw myself too, Isaac admitted, Saw what I'd become hollowed out, just going through motions. You three brought me back to life as much as I gave you shelter. Then we saved each other. Reckon we did. They reached the porch and settled on the steps, watching their children play as twilight deepened. The air smelled of growing things and possibility, inside. Supper waited to be warmed. Later, there would be evening lessons. Isaac was reading full books now under Melissa's patient instruction. Sometimes I still think about that platform, Melissa said quietly. About standing there, believing I was worthless. That $1 was generous. Isaac squeezed her hand. Some things can't be measured in dollars. Some things, family, dignity, love are worth everything you have. Even when that's just $1, especially then, that's when you know it's real. When you give everything and it's enough, Emma called from the yard, showing them a flower she'd found. Samuel attempted a cartwheel and ended in a laughing heap. Normal evening sounds of a normal family doing normal things, except nothing about them was normal. They'd been broken people standing on opposite sides of a brutal custom. Now they were whole, teaching children and growing crops and building community one small choice at a time. I love you, Melissa said. I don't say it enough. You show it every day. Isaac replied, That's better than words. The lamp glowed steadier as full dark descended. Stars emerged overhead, sharp and bright in the clear spring sky. The children's play gradually wound down as tiredness caught up with them. Isaac stood and pulled Melissa to her feet. Come on, Mrs. Walker, let's get those children fed and bedded. Tomorrow's another school day, and another farm day for you, and another day for us. Isaac said, That's the part that matters. They called the children inside. Emma and Samuel came running, grass-stained and happy and entirely secure in the knowledge they were loved and wanted, as they stepped into the warm cabin. Melissa paused and looked back. The schoolhouse stood visible in the moonlight. The field stretched fertile and green. The road to town was empty, but no longer felt like a path to judgment, just a connection to community, to be traveled when needed. She turned back to her family, to the life they'd built from $1 and impossible hope. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night but holding inside all the warmth that mattered. Some journeys begin in desperation, some in cruelty, but the best ones, the ones worth taking, begin in the moment. Someone sees your worth when the whole world has declared you worthless. That's what the dollar bought, not a person, but a chance. Not ownership, but belonging. And that, Melissa thought as she helped Samuel wash his hands for supper, was worth more than all the money in the world.